That's kind of what Josh Fat Booty will talk about outwardly, but in game, like he's very much not quite like completely selfless, but he's not as strong-headed as that. He'll kind of know the limits. He'll respect them a little bit, but he's really working on the macro because as like he is the main shot caller on the team, so he's not really seeking to carry the game straight up. And a nice benefit of that is if he does fall behind or if something does go a little wrong, he's not going to tilt off the face of the earth or anything like that. He's going to understand that okay, we're a little behind, we got to set back now, we got to play a little more respectfully, um, and we'll go from there. So that is a nice quality when whenever something wrong happens in bot, whether it's 2v2 or 3v3 or some 5-man TP play like in game one, um, we handle it coolly, and that works to our benefit, I think.
100%. It just noticed, especially in bot lane, you guys were always on the back foot,
Hmm.
and especially in just bot lane, where it just didn't seem like things really got going down there. And actually, there was a couple times too, especially when I noticed that you'd go in, and it seemed like to be like a little bit of a lack of synergy, where I think when lolersa was on the thresh, hooks a Leona, pulls her under turret, and then you assume that she's going to be able to get that, and you hop on top of the Varus. And things don't quite happen to go that way. Leona ends up getting out and
Yeah,
things.
like in a way that's greedy on my end because instead of going for the surefire kill on Leona, I go for the double whammy on Varus as well.
Yeah,
Just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that we also get Leona and then can convert it into Varus kill as well.
yeah.
But especially with Tristana resets like that. But that's kind of idealistic. That's kind of solo queue. That's kind of normal's
hmm
mindset. So that's like again like that's something that I have to work on as well. Everyone has their flaws.
100%. It just felt like there was a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of lack and just a lot of a little bit breaks of synergy. That felt like it was
Hmm.
across the map. Even like especially it's a pro phase in game three where it just seemed like he's on this Victor against a Kassadin, and of course Kassadin's going to outroam a Victor with those ultimates and having TP, being able to roam bottom faster. But it just seemed like in game three he didn't really have as much pressure around the mid lane as he normally would. He can play the Twist of Fate or the Victor or an Orianna and shove in wave after wave after wave, but it didn't really feel like that he had the pressure of just around the mid lane so that you could kind of invade the middle area of the jungle and things like that and get ahead. It just didn't quite seem to be there, and it seemed to be kind of it almost felt like kind of lax in a way.
Mm.
The
Well,
pressure wasn't
in that
quite
game,
there.
like as a Victor versus Kassadin, you definitely have the upper hand in the early game, and he pressed that as well. He pushed the wave like on the first wave even, and kept that push for I think the first three waves or so. And I look at mid lane a little bit into the game, and I see he's like up 39 to like 24 or something like that in CS. Hasn't been ganked yet. That's cool. Like Zach and I are just matching each other across the map on Ramus Zach matchup. Um, and that's going well for us. I'm actually unclear on what led to the underperformance from mid and jungle in that game. So that's a good thing. Like that's something that we got to look at this game for, and other games like it to better understand what makes us lose when we do lose.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it definitely felt like games one and two kind of felt very similar. A lot of jungle pressure, and the junglers really fighting for it. Ganks here, ganks there, ganks there.
Right. Yeah.
Lots of kills and lots of action.
Hmm.
I couldn't even sit down and say, okay, this is what I think's gonna happen next, because so many things kept happening. But then game three just felt completely different. NA
Yeah.
Lab on that Zac, actually 0-0-0 for the better part of that
Right.
game.
And yeah, I was that way too. I think I like broke the silence with one assist or something,
One
then went
assist
back
on
to
the
like
top side of the map, yeah.
yeah, something like that. It's like some counter gank, I think. I don't know, but I actually think like my personal theory on what happened there was they didn't want to ban Zach, but they didn't want me playing it either. Even
100%.
though the game two like Zach wasn't that great compared to game one, so we
I
thought that
disagree.
I don't know like is we felt it was an underperformance, me
hmm
included.
Yeah.
So what I think actually happened was they didn't want to ban it, so they picked it, even though
100%.
they're not entirely comfortable on it. They feel like they could play it, but it's not their specialty, obviously.
hmm
But then the same thing happened for us. Like we couldn't play Zac, but we didn't even want to play Zac. Actually, we wanted to play with the Ramus, but Ramus is still not as comfortable as Zac. So both junglers on a less comfortable more tanky, supporty champions made for a quieter jungle in general in Game 3.
Which ultimately allowed the Cassidy to even just kind of have his way with his roams and picking up, kills, whether it be on the bottom side or, you know,
Yeah.
or on the top side, kind of allowing him to kind of do, kind of what he wanted. It seemed like the macro game in that sense was kind of figured out from that kind of a standpoint. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a fan question for you, if
Okay.
you're ready. From your boy Alk. As someone who predominantly is seen to play tanks, is there ever a time during champ select or scrims when the idea of you playing an aggressive or more early game champion to try to get the ball rolling for your lanes?
Yeah, definitely, like all the time. That's kind of what the Rammus pick is supposed to be, along with like some other picks that we're trying to develop, where that's like been a primary concern for us. That my specialty is like quieter early game, but very solid mid and late game junglers, where it kind of relies on lanes to be quieter or like to dodge and avoid or like aggressive early game enemy junglers like Elise or Elise in anything like that, Jarvan. Um, and so that's an established weakness for our team in all of our opinions. So that's kind of the reason that you see us banning Jarvan throughout the series
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Xin Zhao as well. Like, granted, they're kind of overtuned champions. I think Jarvan just got a nerf because he was decidedly overtuned. Xin Zhao is still strong, obviously. So we don't like dealing with that sort of thing because we're not that great at that either. Like me personally, our general understanding of the game, how we set each other up. So to avoid that, we kind of just try to stick to our guns and try to lab more early game things when we're out of tournament. But up till now, that is definitely something that we've had to work on. Um,
100%.
yeah, so I'd say often we think about that.
So then, what's the next step forward? Unfortunately, taking a couple losses back to back, and especially having this game up 1-0. What's really the next step for you guys?
Right. So in general, we do feel that our practice has been lacking. It's almost as if like most of our games that we play together are tournament matches, as opposed to like personal practices among the team, like playing flex or scrimming other schools, other teams, whatever. We all agree that more of that could be happening, and so we're gonna work for that. Otherwise, we've been talking about diversifying champion pools across the board. My early game junglers included like mid lane being a little notorious for being like
Mm-hmm.
ban worthy, as like because in the past like it's not nearly as bad as it was before, but in the past they've been able to ban 2 or 3 champions, and granted that like that demands them to ban a certain amount, which leaves other things open for our team, like the specialty Zac or Darius, stuff like that. But it's still a bit of a detriment if one of your lanes is limited, top lane as well, like support as well in the beginning. So we're definitely working on things across the board.
Yeah, I actually definitely agree. I mean, everybody, no matter what, have their issues. I mean, y'all aren't necessarily the best of players in regards to the grand scheme of things, like with regards to
Right.
ranks. You guys are obviously, obviously amazing and representing, an entire school of 40,000 people. So you're definitely the best of the best there is. But there everybody, even in the challenger levels, people still have their own limitations, as you said.
Right.
Um,
Like local is one thing, but it's better to have larger visions.
yeah, 100%. Um, One other fan question from your boy Safe Hanbali, Kenzoku Spartan. Regarding shot calling in game, do you guys mainly take in outside shot calls, or is it mainly reliant on Josh? Like, is everyone putting in input, or do you all trust the one call?
That's something that's been a bit foggy lately, especially. Like Josh will be speaking the most, so he'll seem like the primary shot caller, and like he very arguably is the primary shot caller. But um, because of the lack of practice, or I feel because of the lack of practice, it's been a bit hard to find one call and commit to it, especially after subbing out a support player on the team. Recently picking up lolersa again, it kind of jumbles things up. We don't have the exact same dynamic, and we're still trying to find the dynamic we settle on because we're finding more and more that some players who are speaking Some players who aren't speaking as much should be speaking more, which would inherently change the net dynamic of the team verbally. So it is he definitely says the most, but everyone does feed information to him, and there are times when like anyone on the team, there are times when they may want to make a call because they believe they see something that they believe is completely true. They're certain that it's going to work, so they call for it to happen. Everyone else kind of evaluates it really quick, and if we have a majority opinion or no one is super against it, we go for it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you have to take those risky calls if you're ever going to learn the limits.
Yeah, and you can even argue, the Baron in game two, where it seems really risky just from a spectator point of view. With a couple of you guys being low, even though you had a 5v3 advantage, which didn't end up working out and led to actually the other team securing the Baron. And, we all knew what happened after that. But,
Right.
you're 100% right. Sometimes you have to make those calls. You have to be the fly quests of the teams out there. You have to make those Baron calls, and that's going to be the one way that you're going to learn from it.
Yeah. That's actually that specific moment. I remember thinking, I really don't agree with this call, and I think Josh didn't either. But we had like other people on the team were emphatically saying we should, and those people tend to be right. So we went with it, and I consciously had the thought, well, if this doesn't work out, then at least we learned that like we are fallible in certain aspects. Like there are definitely ways that we can screw up. So not everything should be taken as gospel, and we'll we'll go with like with every failure we refine our estimations for further games. So every time we fail a Baron, we're better at calling the next Baron because we know we can't go quite as far.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the very last thing that I have for you is how do you guys adapt to a lot of situations? So like for instance, with bot lane being behind all three games, what was kind of the mentality with that? How'd you go around playing with it? Because I noticed, you on this Rammus, you kept repeatedly trying to gank bot and get the Vayne actually going because you know what the Vayne can do in the mid game with a little bit of an advantage, but ultimately wasn't able to quite happen. So with that bot lane being behind all three games, what was really the mindset?
Well, every game goes differently based on who's popping off, what the champion matchups are, who's confident, who's not confident, what everyone's calling for. Going into that game, actually, my plan was to just camp the Kassadin like very early before he has access to his ultimate and he's super safe. Like burn his flash once, do a camp or two, come right back, kill him, do it again maybe. But instead of that, we pushed in mid, and so that's something that we have to adapt to on the fly. So instead, I say, okay, well, let's just go gank bot because Sivir is quite gankable in a similar way to Kassadin, other than Spell Shield, which we can pop anyway. So we go into game thinking one thing. If that has to adapt, because like one lane is winning a little more than you thought, and the other is losing a bit more than you thought, you have to be on your toes and switch up the game plan immediately like that. Unfortunately, a lot of the ganks that we committed bot weren't optimally executed, perhaps optimally planned either. But again, that's similar to the Baron call, and like you got to find out what works, what doesn't work, and a lot of that comes with practice and knowing your limits here and there.
Definitely. And actually, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna throw in one more person into here to hear what they have to say.
Hmm.
We're gonna see if we can't get lolersa in here too. Is he in?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
All
What's
right,
up?
perfect. So we're with lolersa as well. The support for UF. Um, Couple fan questions actually for you as well. You guys are popular group.
Hit me with
One
that.
from my boy McBree. Alk Battery. Question really directed towards you for the moment is the support role is certainly diversified away from the Jannas and Sorakas of the past couple months. The new runes and previous changes to Ardent have put a new breath of life into the role. Xerath and Leona seem like whole opposites to what we have compared seen to the Threshes and Alistars that we've seen typically much more recently. Are these new additions something that we can look forward to seeing more of, or are they just passing fads that aren't really going to stay?
It's just because of the changes in the way runes work, and Xerath has a lot of raw damage and like base stats, or you can abuse him. He's so oppressive right now. So it's probably a meta thing. Poke supports usually like Zyra, Karma. They just have a lot of base damage, so you can abuse it a lot in lane. So that's usually what ends up happening. Tanks will always be in bot, so that's for sure. Just um, but when poke supports are just so much more oppressive that it doesn't matter that you have a Leona, which is one of the highest win rate supports right now. Um, then that's when you know that you want to pick that. So I picked Xerath. Actually, our draft went wrong because the idea was pick the Xeraths and disguise it as a mid lane pick, but we picked Victor right after, which just backfired entirely.
Mm-hmm.
They knew exactly what it was. They were probably going to pick the same lanes regardless, but once they knew what our composition was, it really messed it up.
Yeah.
We executed poorly because we did gain a lead in that bot lane, which was the whole point of the pick, and I was doing a decent job at poking the Ezreal. Actually, we were poking pretty freaking well. The problem was that we just have so many problems as a team in execution that when the lead we had was instantly thrown with lack of vision, and we just get ganked and die.
Yeah, I definitely noticed it, and actually some other things where it seemed like even though you guys were the long range poke supports, I noticed once or twice the Leona is able to walk right up to a Jhin or even to you and just stun you guys up, and it just kind of seemed like a lack of communication with with some different
Yeah,
things.
I don't really have a lot of feels, so it's kind of just
Yeah,
annoying.
yeah, and you didn't have
She can,
feels at
she
all.
can
This makes it harder.
yeah, she can literally run um at the Jhin, and even if I stun her, if she buffers her E correctly, it won't even CC her. So
Definitely.
it's not a good pick in that sense. But again, it's just when it comes down to execution. Like if we were to play some other team and they do that to us, we'd probably get pounded under turret. That's like part of it. Uh, Unfortunately, because Xerath is not like I'll get a lot of gold from spamming skills and whatnot, but positioning is really important, and my positioning wasn't as good as it should have been. So I mean, I can go into detail about it. I don't want to waste everybody's time. He asked a question about breathing life into the support role, and I'm just gonna make it. Yes, it definitely did. I was definitely tired of the Ardent Sensor meta, but those picks are still good. It's just which one is better is the question. So what ends up happening is when the meta shifts, then these picks come back into the picture, and I'm patiently waiting. I actually had a really good Thresh game, and I'm kind of sad I didn't play Thresh again.
Yeah.
I do think that was we have again issues, but when we were discussing, if you see Vayne Leona, that is actually a terrible lane, and I did not enjoy it whatsoever. I really did not get to execute on the Leona pick, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. And I guess, next question that response kind of segues into and gets Marcus a little bit involved too is with bot lane with some of these picks, like especially the Xerath, how does the Xerath interact with the rest of the game in terms of being within the support role, and then how does the jungle game shift with regards to that pick?
Right. So whenever you support is one of those roles, similar to top lane and jungle, where you can run a lot of different things in there. And whenever you're building a team comp, you have to have a sort of balance to it. Where okay, you need a certain sort of front line if you're trying to play a certain play style. Like if you're deathballing, you can't just have your whole team full of like squishy like um, uh, artillery mages or assassins like Evelynn and Zed and stuff like that. There have been points in the past where this is in a similar case. We've ran Evelynn and Zed in the same game, which is an arguably viable thing to do, but not in the playstyle that we've adapted ourselves to over time. So in a similar way, if we can't play like Evelynn and Xerath in bot lane or anything like that because you lack a front line, you lack CC, there are all these different considerations. So generally the tankiness on any given team is going to run between top lane, jungle, and perhaps support. But even if you run a tanky support, it's not going to be the same mega tank as a jungler or a top laner can become. So it's these sort of little things about team balancing, as well as the dynamics in a lane, in lane matchups specifically, that go into finding the perfect pick, and the combination of picks for a team. So if again, like we agreed that Xerath wasn't the best pick, especially in game two. In game one, it definitely worked out better, as we could see. But if when we pick the squishier Xerath in game two, and they have the tankier engaged support, I can't remember. I think it was Leona
It was Leona.
that they picked. Yeah. it makes it a bit harder when like we only have I forgot who we were running top lane, but it was someone
Poppy.
tankier in top lane. You're right, Poppy. Someone tanky like Poppy in top lane as well as a jungle. Yes, it's tanky, but you're kind of relying on those two people to be ahead, and so we do think that if we had a different CC oriented or more utility support, it could have went differently.
But that's something that we've just struggled with. We used to have a better draft, I'd say, when we were a little more like the meta was in our favor and we had more consistency in what supports to pick. I literally think that was the difference. So we could always pick bot lane first if that was usually our strategy, because it just makes life easier. We can get Jeff the pick that we need. If we have to do our third pick jungle, which is easy, we know what we want. Makes our life a lot easier. But now that the meta shifted, I don't feel comfortable picking the support early on unless we have a composition that is just really well defined, which hasn't been the case because we just struggle sometimes in the champ select about what picks we want to take. And that just stems like a little bit from our champion pools and also what we're comfortable on.
Yeah, and that's something that you're gonna have to shift and change. I mean, as I had discussed with Marcus, is is that like you guys are obviously very very good players. You're not the top of the tier. Like you're not up in challenger, or way up there. But everybody then has their own inconsistencies. I know Prophase is a two trick. Marcus especially specializes a lot on a lot of the tanks. Coma likes to play a lot more carry-oriented top laners, even if it is a Darius and it's tankier, a lot of carry-oriented things. So it's finding that ideal balance and finding things that makes everybody happy to play. Because I mean, ultimately the goal is to have fun and compete and win, for you guys. And so I already asked Marcus, is it? But I want to know from you, Ian. What's the next step for you guys? In getting ready ultimately for ULOL.
The next step is just we need to define ourselves as a team in a way that creates consistency, and that is very big. I genuinely believe that once we figure out, kind of find our pace, that we're gonna really develop as a team. But we've had so many hiccups in this short period of time with every competitive game we play, that it's been a rough patch for us, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
What feels like a rough patch, at least.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you guys didn't have UCF land turn out your way, at least for the finals. And then, of course, not wanting to drop, two series in a row, but, had a very nice and exciting 3-game series to end off this one. Maybe it didn't end up the way you guys wanted, but in the end, getting some good experience playing against a lot of better players and better teams, trying to find different ways to kind of improve and things like that. I guess. So yeah, so that's pretty much it from me. I don't want to hang up you guys for too long, especially since I see it's midnight. I just want to let you know, though, I'm gonna play one more song. I didn't get to get all the way through it. I'm dedicating it to you guys. A little bit of a pick me up, in case you guys want to listen to it. But otherwise, thank you so much, Salamander Man. Thank you so much, lolersa, for joining me for this post-game interview and not having any cringiness or anything. Any laughter. I mean, it didn't matter. We had it. But it was definitely really nice talking to you guys, especially in this kind of a sense. And yeah, this last song's gonna be for you guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for casting.
Thank you.
Of course.